Hello, Internet. I'm here with Jacob. This is Trey or T. We've got some cool friends on like Bridges of Meaning and everything. So this is one of them. He's what I call the Hebrew guy. He jokingly calls me the English guy. It's pretty funny. I actually was learning a bit of Hebrew from him, like the language, and so he's Jewish and he has all sorts of interests and stuff. So we'll talk about stuff.
Yay!
All right. So I've got a few things written down. First thing I have written down, I don't know if that's the first. Let me actually, let's have, like, what do you think about God? Like, I'm a God follower. I follow the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, love, truth, wisdom.
I think God. It's really important to me. I think the most important characteristic of God is the ineffable nature of God. Um, because I think that God, in a way, functions like a variable, um, which you can do algebra on variables. You can only do arithmetic with um with numerals. You need variables to do algebra and higher order math.
This is why I like this guy. He goes straight to the math.
um and I think God functions in the word God, the concept of God, it kind of functions that way. It is a direction that we are headed towards, although we don't know where the final destination is, right? And everybody has a vague concept of God, I think. And some people decide to follow that, and some people decide not to. And I think, turning towards God is the most important thing people can do in order to try to know God. And because God is infinite, that always pushes you a little bit further towards good. It's always beyond your grasp, but it's I guess maybe you could also call it like a north star, right? Something
Yeah,
you
the Christmas
travel
star.
towards.
Yeah. So, like, to agree with you, basically, that sort of broad definition, good orderly direction, God, good orderly direction, is what I've heard.
Oh,
That's
that's
a
cute.
pretty good starting little deal. When I was told that, I was like, yeah, okay, um, very good.
Yeah,
So let's see. You like Magic the Gathering? Do you like? How about you talk about that a bit?
yeah. I used to be very, very involved in Magic the Gathering. I used to be a tournament official on the Pro Tour and stuff. And I have a very big Magic collection. I started playing Magic probably before you were born, 1993.
Oh, very close.
um, and it's I got into it because I really like the art. So Anson Maddox, his artwork really inspired me, and I really like the art and the imagination and the mathematical nature of it. Right? You have to know your statistics. Um, and so my friends, yeah, I played a lot, um, and then after college, I started playing again, and then I actually started like professionally working in Magic, and that's how I ended up actually in insurance. Was kind of like as a sideline. I was appraising Magic collections, and somebody needed an appraisal in order to insure their Magic collection. So I'm like, hey,
I
I
didn't
could.
even know the MTG insurance industry existed.
It does exist, yes. So I was, and if somebody needs MTG, I mean, I,
Do you
I,
need
I
home insurance? Do you need MTG insurance? Come to Jacob today.
Yeah, basically. So that's how I fell into insurance, and that was like 7 years ago. And at the same time, I was involved in a lawsuit against Hasbro. And I like to joke that when I started to sue them, they were still a top 500 right company, that, but now they're not. Uh, um, that was an interesting lawsuit. There's actually videos about that. I did interviews like years ago with some MTG um, places on that. It was a big deal.
They're like, you're the
Several.
MTG Hasbro guy.
I am the judge lawsuit guy.
Aha.
Yeah, MTG judge lawsuit guy. Well, there were lawsuits after me be- because I settled, and then but Hasbro made the mistake of settling with me individually as opposed to as a class. And then afterwards, they pissed off a bunch of other judges. Those judges decided to sue them too. And that became a whole thing. And
So, one
yeah,
thing to be clear, you're basically a lawyer.
well, I
You're,
went to law school
yeah,
and I've studied law way too much, but
okay.
I'm not an actual lawyer. No, I never
Uh,
took the bar.
Without the certificate, though, you have had the training. Like, you were like, as you've had conversations with me, you've said something like you were one step away from getting the certificate.
Yeah, I'm pretty close actually. Yeah, I'm pretty close. I mean, I've never practiced law other than, during summers while I was in law school. Like, I helped out. I helped out at the HIV/AIDS legal services in Los Angeles, and I worked with the Department of Housing. I was really into real estate back then.
Hmm. So, what I was gonna get to before I forget, which I will very soon, I'm sure, is the Hasbro that you said class versus individual. Do you want to get into the not too much, but
So when you sue someone, you can sue them as a class or you can sue them as an individual. So let's say,
huh.
um, for example, let's say I want to sue Google because of something they did something wrong, like they injured me some way based on one of their services, right? Um, and I could sue them just as myself, or I could sue them as a class of people who, I don't know, use Google searches,
So like
right, or
representatives.
advertise on Google, and then that class represents everyone who is similarly situated. Okay, and so when there's a settlement with a whole class, then it's a much bigger procedure, and it's usually used on things where each person individually, like every Google advertiser suing Google individually. You know that's going to be lots and lots of small people, and nobody wants to take the risk and deal with it. But if you do it as a
Gotcha.
class, right, then it's a lot more likely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just kind of the cogs in my brain kind of working, and I'm trying to retain this, learn what is. So a class reminds me of when you're making a business. There are like abstractions that help you do that. Less risk to help you do that, and so that's exactly what the class thing is, I guess.
Yeah, it is an or I mean it is a legal fiction which
Hmm.
helps to organize people. It's funny, so my handle is Arduous, and it comes from from an organizational behavior class I took years and years ago in law school. And organizational behavior is actually really important, and I think understanding how these legal fictions we create for ourselves, right? And I mean, this gets into what Paul talks about, spirits and principalities, and powers. Is it powers and principalities? What is it?
Something like that. I've
Yeah,
read the Bible like powers, principalities, and there's like one or two other words sometimes.
yeah. So I mean, we as human beings are able to organize ourselves in all kinds of like Voltron formations,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that's really important for getting things done. Bridges of meaning is in a sense a class or a community or a corporation. You're right. Um, Using corporate in the more denotation classic sense of it.
Yeah. I love abstractions. In case anybody doesn't know, I talk very abstractly sometimes. So this is cool. And if anybody doesn't know the Voltron reference, if I know correctly, it's like from some Transformers episode or whatever. The like 5 Transformers come together into one big one, and so that's the point, coming together to become basically like a more than the sum of its parts kind of thing.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Stronger together.
yeah, it's great. What is it, like unity in unison, something like that? Yeah, good. So I have some things written down. I didn't want to interrupt you. So that phrase legal fiction, that's actual terminology, lawyer terminology.
Yeah, I mean legal fiction. Yeah, so we talk about legal fictions. I mean, if you read, so if you are interested in the law, there reading Supreme Court cases is actually more popular than most people think. There's a collection of Supreme Court cases called Scalia dissents, which is pretty interesting reading. Even I think even if you're not a lawyer, it's pretty interesting reading. But Clarence Thomas is one of the most amazing legal minds in, I believe, in human history. Like he writes a lot more than most Supreme Court justices do, and he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And even when he dissents from decisions not to give certiorari, which is so in order for your case to get to the Supreme Court, yeah, um, they have to give certiorari, or they can deny certiorari, which means that no, the Supreme Court is not going to take your case. And even when he dissents from, or sometimes he even agrees with denying certiorari, but he writes this whole long thing. He's brilliant. I highly recommend reading his opinions.
Very interesting. Yeah, to me it just seems like a good thing to educate yourself generally, educate about like America. Supreme Court is one of the three big branches, there we go, of government. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the first year of law school, I think the second and third year of law school are worthless. But the first year of law school really helps you understand the fundamental architecture of our society in ways that most people do not. Right? Not knowing, for example, what privity of contract or what standing is, not understanding the concepts of jurisdiction, um, and like really understanding the basics of contract law and what constitutes a tort. Right? I'm using a lot of words that are legal jargon
yeah.
people don't know,
Right.
but these are all things which are incredibly useful for anyone living in the United States to understand. And we
Oh, dude.
spend a lot of our time distracted. We
Hello, we're
we
back. Sorry, we had to interrupt. Continue.
Yeah, so like it's funny. Like I was saying, I think we get distracted from the really important things because things come up, and Um, actually, like I think the most important thing Jordan Peterson ever taught me was that attention is the most basic unit of human thought, right? The most fundamental concept of human thought is attention. What are you paying attention to? And I think we often get distracted, which is I think the most important thing.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson is great.
Yeah, and I'm reading Ian McGilchrist right now, and I've only gone like 4 pages into this long book, which is like really jam packed. And I'm already constantly thinking of like the stuff he talks about. So
Huh? Which one was that?
Ian McGilchrist, The Master and His Emissary. I've listened to a lot of his lectures, but I don't think I quite really. I wasn't sure if I needed to read the book, but I did decide to read the book, and now I'm kind of excited about it, even though I'm only 4 pages in.
Okay, you do not regret it. Very nice.
Yeah.
Hmm. All right. Okay. Well. Let's see here. I'm looking at my notes to peruse which direction we could go. Legal fiction. You said a lot of lawyer words, which is cool. This is exactly, like those things I don't know, and so now I can research those. That's partly what I wanted to talk to you.
Honestly, looking up those words is I would recommend that to anybody who wants
Yeah.
to live as an adult in our society.
Hear that, internet? All right. Let's see. So just to make sure I understood, going back to the MTG judges thing, I wanted to make sure to retain and understand information. It says MTG judges is the class, which we kind of talked about a little bit, but I wanted to make sure, like, so they settled individually with you. If they had it settled as a class, nobody else could then come to sue them. That's how that works?
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
the judges.
No other member of that class could have sued for the same thing.
Huh. So I very much like to understand sort of all the angles and stuff. If someone was a MTG something else, like a cleaner up, or I don't know what the words would be, that's not a judge, but it's something else, they could still sue if they had done the class thing. How does that work?
Even if they had done the class thing, yeah. I mean, it depends how the class was defined.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly how the class was
All right,
defined
that's fine.
because we started out with just complaints and stuff, but like and everything was settled out of court. But I think if they had in fact settled, they probably would have included everyone who's ever been a tournament official
Hmm.
at a Wizards of the Coast event in the class.
Right, very
But
broad.
yeah, I mean, when you're settling, you want to make it as broad as possible, I guess. I think.
Huh. Interesting. So, I want to make sure I understand. There was one more question. Settle on class. Oh, I was thinking about like there are those. What was it? It's like TV commercials about like pharmaceuticals, and maybe it's like a settlement they talk about. And so, is that what this is? Like the pharmaceuticals say, we settle on this class of people, and then like TV commercials go out to like the lawyers are like, we'll settle your thing. You can get part of the money of this $2 million settlement or whatever. Is that what that is?
That's I mean that's a much larger class than I was involved in, but when a class is that large, usually part of the settlement is well, whenever there's a settlement, there has to be an attempt to reach out to every member of the class and to every member of the class, and then people can individually opt out of the settlement if they are a member of the class. Um,
Hmm.
or they can accept the settlement.
Huh.
Um,
That does
and
sound like I understand it. That's good.
I didn't hear you.
I was just saying it does sound like that I understand it correctly.
Yeah, yeah, it's the exact same thing as
Very good.
those stuff you.
Very good, very good. Um, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this is a Jewish man. He does Hebrew. I was learning Hebrew from him, so it's very knowledgeable guy, and good job on that. Just to say that, thank you very much for those efforts.
I was really surprised how fast you caught on. I mean, you can now. I mean, you don't understand the words, but you can read them.
Right? Yeah. It's absolutely fantastic in my opinion. So let's see. Insurance. If you want to, you can talk a bit about insurance, and then we'll get on to maybe the last two sections.
Well, okay. I mean, me getting into insurance would like
Take an
could
hour,
take
a few hours.
hours and hours. So
Okay.
briefly, what I will say is that
Define insurance.
what?
I was saying if you want a brief thing, maybe just define insurance.
Well, okay. So that's I think there is deliberate miseducation
Okay.
into what insurance is, because insurance is such a powerful um I would say it's
Concept.
as powerful as agriculture. And
Okay.
um having insurance is, people don't realize how new it is. I
Hmm.
highly recommend the book uh An Illustrated History of Lloyd's of London. And it sounds like it's a children's book, and it is illustrated, and it's pretty easy to read. But I highly recommend it
Can you
because
spell Lloyd's?
insurance is a lot more important than I think most people realize. And I compare it to a delicate flower that we as a society
Huh.
have learned to cultivate.
Huh.
And if we don't cultivate insurance, then I think we end up with financial collapse. Like I think
Huh.
capitalism is made possible by insurance, and unfortunately, I do see that because of bad education on what insurance is, I do think that it's yeah, I think most people have no clue, which is why, I mean, I could go on for hours and hours, but most part of the reason is nobody cares because it's
Right.
such a dry subject, but I get excited about it.
Yeah. Only us nerds care about all the fake words and stuff. It's great.
Oh, I
Uh,
want to story. Okay, this is the only interesting story in insurance. So I was trying to look up insurance historians to see like who the great scholars of insurance are, and I found out this. There was one guy who wrote a lot of books about the history of insurance. So I looked him up, and I found out why he's not like nobody's heard of him is because when the Soviet Union fell, the records of like the KGB and the Stasi were opened up, and it was found out that he was a secret agent of the Stasi who was using his position as a professor of insurance history to seduce the secretaries at the Department of, like, whatever the equivalent of the Department of Defense is at in the United Kingdom. And like it turns out he was apparently like a double agent. He was actually working for the British government, pretending to be an agent for the Stasi, seducing secretaries at the Department of Defense under the cover of being an insurance agent, insurance history professor.
wow. And who is that?
I forget his name. I mean, I can look it up for you, but
Yeah.
like,
Well, I guess we'll have that on next episode or something. We'll see.
yeah,
But that's
I
funny.
actually, so when I did my video with Grim, I also mentioned it, and so I had just looked up the article about it.
Very nice.
But yeah, so if I can find it, I'll let you know.
Something to look forward for a next episode. Internet, come back again. All right, so yeah, insurance. We could talk about ours, I guess, in another video about insurance for those who like that kind of stuff. right now. So you're Jewish. There's you're into like this thing called Kabbalah, and you're Persian. So in any order you like, talk about those.
Yeah, so my family, so my father's mother's family still speaks Aramaic, okay? And um, because they still speak Aramaic because basically they've been living in the same area since probably the Babylonian captivity, but probably at least 1,000 years, maybe for several thousands of years. So, like, my grandmother told me when she was a kid, like she just lived in a farm, and the only running water was a river that they would like every day. What she would do with her sisters and her mother, and all her female family members, is either take the clothes down to the river to wash them all day, or take the cooking utensils down to wash them every day, or they would be cooking. And she said when she finally moved to Tehran, and there was running hot water in the sink, like, and there was the kitchen and stuff, like her life changed so dramatically. She just kind of felt like it was a completely different world.
Hmm.
And I mean, I was born in Tehran. After I was born right before the Islamic Revolution,
Hmm.
and soon after the revolution, we tried to leave for the first time. That was not successful. Um, then in 1985, we left again, and it took us about 8 months to have our refugee application processed. And so I came here as a under political asylum in the United States, and
Welcome.
yeah, that was back in 1985.
Welcome. Only 30 years late. Well,
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I consider myself much more of an American than Persian, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's
I
only like 5 years or something before, like in the law. You know law, so however many years for. I don't even know the word for it actually.
well, I'm a
Americanization.
citizen now, so yeah.
Right, exactly. That's yeah. Okay, cool. So, um, so that was the Persian and the Jewish part, or one of those not in there.
Oh, well, I mean, we were Jews.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and in Iran, being Jewish was like a legal reality, right? Because in Iran, I mean, I went to a school for Jews that was run by the state. And like every morning, like, so there was an American flag and an Israeli flag painted on the doorstep. So when we went into school, we had to step on it. And every morning we had at like exercises, and during the morning exercises we had to like yell, chant, death to America, death to Israel. And this was in first
Jeez,
grade, so yeah.
that's pretty bad. Would you say
It,
that it was like segregated? You were talking about
yeah, this
Jewish.
was Jewish school.
Okay, so you were like specifically separated from like other people.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah. There is, yeah. Iran is religiously segregated. Like yeah, very much so.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know about those places, so yeah, that's bad.
It's funny. Like I was years and years ago, I was telling someone about my experiences as a child, and it was over the internet, and they just didn't believe me. They're like, "No, you're lying. Nothing like that ever happened." They just could not believe that something like that happened.
Yeah, that's bad stuff, man. I'm glad you got out of that. I guess you haven't had any such recently. It's a good thing, you know. America is great.
Yeah, I mean, people. I do have family who travel back to Iran, and I just don't understand that. Like, I keep on telling them, I mean, they tend to be either a lot younger than me or a lot older than me. And like the younger ones say, oh, you know, right after the revolution, things were a lot worse. It's not so bad anymore. But I mean, I have no desire whatsoever to go back to Iran.
Pretty sure they have still I don't know what you'd say backwards principles over in that direction geographically of the world. So, yep, that's how that works. um, right, cool. So you're like a Jewish Persian or Persian Jew. That's cool. Very good. So the last thing that I'm thinking, this is probably another one that could be like hours and hours, and so it's just basically like, what is Kabbalah? How are you into it? What is going on?
Okay, so yeah, this is a difficult one because most Christians, most non-Jews have not, what they've heard of the Kabbalah tends to be really weird stuff like Madonna and stuff. And there's the Kabbalah Center, which is a cult, just similar to like Scientology.
Right.
Um, but so what we do know for sure is that within Judaism, there's been at least for the past 2,000 years a an esoteric tradition, right? And that esoteric tradition, I mean, we know it existed during the time of Jesus. The question becomes, what was the content of that esoteric tradition? And something that happened around the year 1300, somebody, I forget what his name was, um, claimed that he found a manuscript of a book which is called the Zohar, and he published it. And so, if you ask academicians, I think the consensus is that he wrote it himself. I find that to be a preposterous idea because what actually ended up happening was that um, basically all of Judaism um, kind of accepted that this was, in fact, um, part of the esoteric tradition that goes back 2,000 years. And around the year 1500, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who's better known as the Arizal, he lived in a town called Sfat, usually anglicized as Safed, Safed. Um, he lived there with Rabbi Joseph Caro. And at that time, Rabbi Caro wrote what's referred to as the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. And that has generally been, so this is around 1500, that became accepted by pretty much all the Jewish communities from which all the Jews now in the world descend from, right? All those communities pretty much accepted his code of Jewish law. And at the same time, the Arizal, Rabbi Luria, um, started revealing his systematic teachings based on explaining the Zohar, and that was similarly accepted by all the Jewish communities from which pretty much all the Jews now descend. Um, so basically, and until the 1800s, there really only existed that so there was really only Orthodox Judaism, although it didn't exist as a denomination. Around the 1800s, what happened was that there were some Jews who tried to create a sort of reformation within Judaism, similar to the and modeled on the Protestant Reformation. And so now we have Reform as a denomination, Reform Judaism as a denomination, and conservative Judaism split off from that, and Reconstructionists split off from that, and everybody else ended up being called Orthodox, and kind of became its own denomination. So those are the major denominations of modern, what's called Rabbinic Judaism, which almost all Jews alive today are what would be referred to as Rabbinic Jews. Um, throughout human history, there have been other Jewish communities, and there are a couple of really small ones still around which aren't Rabbinic Jews. But yeah, so Rabbinic Judaism split into multiple factions, denominations. But before that happened, um, the Lurianic Kabbalah was accepted by everyone as being the genuine esoteric tradition within Judaism. And, the Arizal revealed it in such a way that it started being studied by a much broader swath of Jews than used to study the esoteric tradition. And then about 300 years ago, Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, he started what's called the Hasidic movement, and he and the Hasidic movement started popularizing certain concepts within the Lurianic Kabbalah. And so most people, when they say Hasid or Hasidim, right, they talk about Hasidic Jews. They don't really. Sometimes they're not even talking about Hasidic Jews. They're actually talking about other Orthodox Jewish communities. But so because Hasidic Judaism really has spread far and wide, and it's almost dominant within Orthodox Judaism these days. Not completely, but yeah, basically everyone to all all major branches of Judaism accept the Lurianic Kabbalah as being part of Jewish history and part of Jewish scholarship. Obviously, Reform and conservative, they don't consider anything. Well, Reform certainly has no requirement of seeing anything as being divinely inspired or anything like that. They tend to be pretty almost atheistic. I mean, there are certainly atheist Reform Jews and even Reform rabbis. And personally, I mean, now I'm getting kind of denominational and maybe a little unfair, but I would say that there are conservative rabbis, I wouldn't call them rabbis myself, who are actually atheists, right? Um, but within Orthodox Judaism, it is universally accepted that Rabbi is Rabbi Isaac Luria and Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, that their teachings are based on genuine Jewish tradition going back thousands of years all the way to Sinai.
Nice.
So that was a brief history.
Good job. All right. So, let's see here. Oh yeah, okay. So now I gotta gather my thoughts. So basically, Kabbalah. Okay, so like, what matters to me is like the words I like to use is like giving and taking. One thing I'll say is like, it's not even like hiding. You can just like you said Zohar and you said a few other books. And are they just like readable? You can like go look them up, or do you have to like go
You could
physically to it?
try.
You could
You,
try.
you certainly could try, and there are certainly people who, I mean, I think there are even people who have done like English translations and stuff, but they are cryptic texts to say the least. Um, my understanding is somewhat advanced. Like I can explain a lot of concepts that probably I would say, I don't know. I I I mean, I have I have been introduced to a lot more of those esoteric teachings than I would say most people. Um,
Jewish or not.
Not necessarily most Orthodox Jews, though.
Hmm.
But I mean, I can't pick up a volume. I mean, I have a volume of the Zohar on 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 that table over there, which you can't see, but I can't open it up and understand it just trying to read it. No, no.
Yeah, yeah. Well, to me, what it'd be is like, yeah, definitely there are a lot of texts that you can't understand. I understand that. But like, if they're like available at all or not is kind of what makes me like when you can't even like look at it's like so super secret and like esoteric a lot of the times the word they use when like you can't even like find it kind of thing. And so I think actually maybe this stuff you can. I'm not sure but I think you can if you just put a little bit of effort into it. So
Well,
that's
in the core text, for example, the Zohar and the Tikkun Zohar, and there are these texts which are available, and there are Kabbalistic texts and esoteric texts which explain them, which are widely available in English. But there are definitely also many texts which only exist in manuscript form because nobody has published them. And those manuscripts are definitely closely guarded. Um, and on, you know, um, there are there are groups where they study these texts there, and in order to be admitted into one of those groups and have access to such manuscripts, um, you have to demonstrate certainly a, a great familiarity with basically like all the other texts of Judaism, and a lot of personal piety. So the true people who, I mean, so there are a lot of people who claim to be Kabbalists,
okay.
and generally anybody who claims to be a Kabbalist, you can be sure is lying.
All
There
right.
are, yeah, I mean, there are a very small number of people who uh, can genuinely be considered mekubalim. Probably the most prominent who is still alive today would be Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. He lives in Jerusalem. I got to meet him once.
Nice.
Yeah, so he is the head of a particular yeshiva, where there are a number of students who are studying these types of texts. He was actually British. I think he was born in Great Britain or something, and was for a time a professional boxer.
Nice.
Yeah, 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 he's probably the most prominent person who's genuinely an expert in the Kabbalah and has knowledge. There are other people, but honestly, I mean, the numbers are quite small, and those people are not the people who are hawking, Kabbalah water, or like, you know, uh, doing all kinds of silly rituals or stuff for people. There are the palm readers and stuff, which that's, I mean, you're talking about, you know, basically I would say you're talking about the difference between astrology and astronomy in my view.
Yeah, that's
Like,
a good one, I think, to delineate.
yeah, I would consider Rabbi Hillel, Chacham Hillel, to be someone who is expert in all areas of Judaism and all Jewish texts. I don't know if I necessarily agree with a lot of stuff he says, um, but I can
So I
expect.
actually want to jump off of where you just went to right there. Also, we've been going for 45 minutes, and just to be clear, I want to keep this under an hour. It's good stuff. This is exactly why I wanted to record with you. These things are kind of my final thoughts. You can do whatever comments after that you like. My final thoughts are like you were just saying astrology and astronomy, so that connects up with what I'm trying to say right now. So these are my definitions with basically spiritual things. My current definitions. I'm kind of thinking through things. I'm just fumbling through life, trying to figure out how things work. Spiritual is like the hardest thing in life to get through. So my current definitions is occult is spiritual power to take, and magic is spiritual power to give. And then I just want to mention a cool video game. It's called Cultist Simulator. I just like that, and it seems relevant to the subject. And so, yeah, the Kabbalah, I don't know much about it, and that's why I wanted to ask you. And I think that it's probably complex. Like, my thought was that it was occult, it's takery, but I don't know about it a lot, and so it matters whether it gives glory to God, in my opinion, Father, Son, and Spirit. And so basically, I need to figure out more about it, which way it goes. And it sounds like what you're saying is that like some people are saying like, oh, this is it, and that's not really it. They're lying. And so it's like astrology, the bad stuff, astronomy, the good stuff, more towards like science and other stuff. So now I'll just let you talk again.
Yeah, I mean, I think a person's personal piety is what differentiates. I mean, I don't think of magic um, as a good thing. I think of it as a bad thing, and I think the we discussed that on the server a lot, and my take on it is that when you are trying to do God's will on earth, and you are trying to understand what God's will is and to enact that through your thoughts, speech, and action, that is proper behavior and that is religious behavior. And I think that when you are trying to basically use God as a sort of divine vending machine, where you push certain buttons and put in certain coins and you get, you know the whatever you were looking for, where you're trying to impose your will on God, I would say that that's cultish, and I would say that that's actually evil, right? I think good is when you try to enact God's will as if it were your own, and evil is when you try to make God enact your will as if it were his own.
Yeah. All right. So just to read these last things, it's just kind of thoughts that as you were talking, I had. So in my opinion, the Bible is the only book you need, as in like the supreme authority. In my opinion, it's the perfect word of God. And when you get into like other books on these things, you got to be very careful. The Bible is, we're like the Jesus, right? Father, Son, and Spirit. Jesus is the Son of God. You have to make sure very much with these kinds of things. And then, yes, I agree with you. It sounds like kind of thing of you want like God wielding you. That's the way to go. That's good and life giving. Not trying to like you wield God. Like you said, a vending machine, or I would think of a tool or anything else. It's not you using God. It's you being used by God. God uses humans for good stuff.
Yeah, I would. The only modification I would make to that is I believe that everything we ultimately need is in the five books of Moses, and anything other outside of the five books of Moses is I consider holy or not, completely based on whether or not it is resonant and consonant with the five books of Moses.
Yeah.
So
So
that
we've actually talked offline about some of this stuff. I think we'll get into it in another video, but just to suffice to say, basically we disagree on that specific point.
yeah.
Cool. It's good to know where we are and to continue talking in civil manners. I love talking with people. So thank you so much, Jacob. Internet, we will see you in the next episode. There's so much to talk about with this wonderful man. See you later.